I used to think marriages were stitched together by the soft things. Coffee steam curling between two mugs, a hand reaching across a console at a red light, text messages with too many hearts after a long day. But paper stitched ours. Paper and ink, signatures that looked like mine and promises that sounded like his. The night I signed the stack was warm even for Austin, the kind that makes window screens hum. The edges of the pages scraped my fingertips. The air smelled like printer toner and the lemon cleaner I used every Sunday. "Just initial here," Evan said, tapping the margin with a glossy black pen. He'd shaved. I could smell the clean bite of aftershave. The pen clicked like a metronome. "It's the refinance," he said. "Lower rate, less stress." His smile was the one he saved for strangers and sometimes for me when I was too tired to argue. I loved that smile. It made me silly. It made me 25 again, even though I was 33 and knew better than to sign anything at 11:30 at night. I traced my name where the flags told me to. My handwriting looked hurried and shy. Evan kissed the top of my head, a habit from the good years. The papers slid across my lap like winter, cool and efficient. The pages had numbers, 2 of 63, 5 of 63, 18 of 63. The stack seemed endless. Then it wasn't. When I put the pen down, Evan exhaled like a man who had just lifted something heavy. 2 weeks later, a man in a Navy suit I'd never met stood on our porch with a clipboard and told me my home belonged to an LLC registered in Delaware. I laughed first. Then I looked at the document he showed me, at the name printed under grantor, at the ribbon of my own signature, slanted and obedient. I had given away our house. I had given away more than that. And the worst part wasn't the loss. It was realizing I had helped him take it. Because I didn't read. Because I loved the man handing me the pen. Because I thought I was signing for our tomorrow and learned I had signed away my yesterdays too. I pressed my nails into my palms until crescents rose. "There must be a mistake," I said, already knowing there wasn't. The man pointed to the line that said otherwise. The lemon cleaner smell lingered, sour now. Somewhere inside, the printer clicked awake, like a witness. I wished it could testify. If paper could talk, what would it say about me? My name is Claire. I grew up 2 hours north of here, in a town with one decent barbecue place and a feed store that doubled as a gossip mill. My mother worked nights at a hospital and napped in a recliner with the TV murmuring. My father taught me to balance a checkbook the old way: pencil, ruler, small calculator with squeaky keys. "Numbers don't lie," he'd say. "People do. Read everything twice." I moved to Austin at 22 because it promised noise and sunlight and the kind of busy that felt like living. I got a job as a registrar at a community college. Forms, deadlines, students who'd cry over lost transcripts and then hug me when we found them. I liked the order of it: line, signature, stamped complete. I liked helping people navigate the maze. That's where I met Evan. He was 30 and finishing a certificate to pivot into tech sales after a long stretch of bartending and charm. He had this way of listening that made you want to talk, and a way of talking that made you feel listened to. We married under live oaks at a venue with twinkle lights and mason jars because we were those people then. He promised laughter. I promised steadiness. We made a life in a one-story house with pale brick and an oak that shed leaves like confetti in the fall. Evan was always starting something: a podcast, a side business selling refurbished speakers, a golf phase that lasted 4 Saturdays. I was always finishing: taxes, grocery lists, thank you cards. We fit, or we convinced ourselves we did. Money was bright at first, then it dulled. Evan's commission checks swung like a pendulum. When they were fat, he booked trips and bought gadgets. When they were thin, he'd go quiet and disappear into spreadsheets. I learned to stretch rice and roast chicken twice and make peace with leftovers. He said we were one big break away from Easy Street. "You'll see, Claire," he'd tell me, kissing my forehead, an optimistic general rallying his only soldier. "We're right there." He started a company with his friend Gabe, who wore shirts tight enough to show every gym hour he'd ever done. They called it Cobalt River and showed me decks full of buzzwords. Lead gen for boutique contractors, Evan said, moving his hands like a magician. Recurring revenue, retainer model. Their website looked nice. The invoices did too. Until some bounced. I watched Evan get shinier around the eyes, the way people do when they're tired but trying to look awake. He stayed out later, networking. He said the word like a prayer. By our 6th anniversary, the house had a new roof we could barely afford, and a patio with a fire pit we absolutely couldn't. The fire pit became a symbol for me. Warmth we paid for in advance. That's the thing I should have noticed. How often future Evan paid for present Evan's decisions. How often present Claire cleaned up past Evan's messes. And yet, we were okay. We were okay because we loved each other. Because he could make me laugh until my stomach hurt. Because he texted me photos of dogs he saw in sales calls. And because I buried my questions under the sand of the next weekend. When the envelopes started arriving with thicker paper and bolder fonts, I stacked them on the counter. He'd sweep them into a drawer like crumbs. Later, he'd say, "It's handled." The night he brought home the stack to sign, I had worked late because enrollment was peaking and students were panicked. He set the papers down so gently they barely whispered. "Refi," he said, "will save hundreds every month." He poured me a glass of wine while I kicked off my flats. "We need to get this notarized tomorrow. I just want your initials tonight so I can review." He had made risotto. Butter and onion hung in the air, the spoon clacking against the pot like a lullaby. My body softened. I asked, "You really cooked?" He grinned. "I really did." We ate at the counter off chipped bowls and talked about a house plant that was dying, and the neighbor's new puppy, and everything except money. The printer sped out 2 last pages, and he said, "One more here, babe." Then we put it away. He tapped. I signed. My father's voice was a radio station just out of range. Read everything twice. I turned the dial and let static win. If love is a contract, what clauses did I ignore? The man on the porch that Tuesday wore the kind of suit that repelled dust. He said service of process and possession and 30 days. He didn't want small talk. He wanted me to acknowledge the reality he carried in a manila folder. I kept thinking about how hot it was, how the cicadas sounded like a power line, how the paper in his hand made a crisp sound when he lifted it from the clip. "The deed shows transfer to Hillside Meridian LLC," he said. He pronounced each letter like a note in a scale. "The notice details your rights to contest." He handed me a packet with tabs. In the corner of the top page, my name, our address, a county seal embossed like a bruise. Evan wasn't home. He was at a client lunch. I called him 3 times. On the 4th, he answered. "We have a problem," I said, shaking so hard the phone knocked my cheek. A man came. "It's fine," he said too fast. "Babe, it's fine. Put the papers on the counter. I'm in the middle of something." I pictured him in a restaurant, glassware shining, his hand covering the phone. "Evan, did you transfer our house?" Silence stretched. I could hear chatter where he was, silverware, music like water. "It's a holding structure," he said finally, "for tax purposes, asset protection. It's how we buy time." "But the notice says possession," I said. The word felt medieval. "It says we don't own." My voice broke. "We do," he said, softer. I just needed to separate title for a bit." Gabe's lawyer said, "Look, I'll be home in an hour. Don't panic." Don't panic is what people say when you are supposed to panic. I stared at the oak leaves trembling in the hot wind and thought about how roots don't move and how paper does whatever you tell it to. When he came home, he smelled like someone else's cologne. He held me and told me I was safe. He put the packet in a drawer. He kissed the back of my neck and said, "I've got this." He poured bourbon and watched a game with the sound low. I watched his jaw. When he fell asleep on the couch, I opened the drawer and read. It wasn't a refinance. It was a quitclaim deed. I had relinquished my interest in the property. The signature looked like mine because it was. Who had I become that I didn't recognize my own consent? The morning after, I called the county clerk's office for my car during a break between advising appointments. The woman on the line was patient in the way of people who have seen every version of surprised. "If the deed was recorded, it's public," she said. Her keyboard clicked like knitting needles. "Yes, ma'am. Recorded the day after notarization. Do you want a certified copy?" I printed it at work because the copier there had better toner. The seal raised under my thumb like a secret. I studied the notary block. A name I didn't recognize, a stamp from a mobile service, a date that matched the night of risotto. There was also something else. Another document I didn't remember. A limited power of attorney granting Evan the right to sign certain forms on my behalf for the purposes of property transfer and mortgage facilitation. My skin went cold. Where had we notarized? The kitchen? Is that even allowed? The stamp said "acknowledged before me," but I couldn't picture anyone else there. I tried to picture the pen I used and ended up picturing my father's hands, how he folded receipts like tiny tents. At home, I found a box in Evan's office labeled Cobalt River Legal. Inside, file folders, invoices, a spiral notebook with numbers that didn't add, a business card for an attorney named L. Decker, who had an office in a building that overlooked the river. There was also a receipt from a notary service with a timestamp, 10:58 p.m. That was the moment I had been rinsing bowls in the sink, steam fogging my glasses. When he showered, I unlocked his laptop because I knew his passcode, still my birthday, even now. I searched Hillside Meridian and found an email thread with Gabe. "We can move assets out of reach for 90, Gabe had written. "Play it right and refinance buys runway." Evan had replied, "Claire will sign. She hates drama." Later in the thread, a message read, "If we need to, POA covers filings." Need to? Need to? The words crawled. I heard the shower cut off. I closed the laptop so hard the machine exhaled. When he came out, his hair smelled like eucalyptus. He smiled like he always did. A little apologetic, a little dazzling. "We're okay," he said, reading my face more accurately than I had read the documents. "I promise." "Then show me. Show me we're okay." He kissed my forehead. "Tomorrow," he said. "I have a call now." Tomorrow is a word that feels generous until it isn't. The next envelope that arrived was from a bank we didn't use. Inside was a statement for a home equity line tied to our address and drawn to its limit. The line item descriptions read like a travel diary for money. Wire transfer Hillside Meridian, cashier's check Meridian Consulting, ACH Cobalt River. My name was on the account as an authorized user. I hadn't authorized anything. I could smell paper, pulp, ink, glue, like a ghost on my hands. What else had my signature been doing while I slept? I took a long lunch and drove to the address on the notary stamp. It wasn't an office. It was a mailbox at a shipping store that smelled like tape and dust. The kid behind the counter was pale, with a pierced eyebrow and a t-shirt advertising a band I pretended to know. "Do you know this notary?" I asked, showing him a photo I'd taken of the stamp. He shrugged. "Mobile service," he said. "They just pick up their mail here." He looked at the photo again and then at me. "You okay?" he asked. I wanted to cry into his stapler. I didn't. I Googled the notary's name and found a phone number attached to a Facebook page with pictures of a woman smiling next to SUVs and a sign that said, "We come to you." I called and asked if she remembered my kitchen. She did not. She said she had a record of notarizing a stack for a couple at a coffee shop on South Lamar that night. "We do a lot of late ones," she said. "People's schedules, you know." She remembered a tall guy who talked fast and a woman who seemed tired and signed without small talk. I didn't go to a coffee shop that night. I was barefoot, in my kitchen. Could someone else have signed? I asked. No, she said. I checked IDs. They read the ID numbers. They were mine. My stomach flipped like a coin. Can I see your log? I asked. Sure, she said, but I'll need a subpoena for that. Her friendliness went professional at the word. That night, I put the statement and the deed and the power of attorney on the table and waited. When Evan came home, he saw the papers and didn't even pretend surprise. He reached for the bourbon and poured a tall one. He didn't offer me any. I did this for us, he said, and I felt the first crack in what I thought I knew about him. Not that he had done it, but that he believed his mouth could still turn theft into generosity. Why? I asked. He talked about cash flow, about a client that hadn't paid, about Gabe's idea to shield assets during a temporary liquidity event. He said words like bridge and arbitrage and float. He avoided steal. You forged my name, I said. He shook his head. You signed. You just don't remember the coffee shop. The confidence in his voice made my head tilt. He believed the version where I was distracted, maybe on my phone, maybe smiling at him while not seeing what I signed. He was rewriting me in real time. Then he said the thing that made my hand go numb. Even if you wanted to undo it, you can't. The LLC already transferred its interest for valuable consideration. I didn't know those words in that order. He held his glass like something precious. To who? I whispered. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. I already knew the name. Gabe. If Betrayal had a letterhead, would it have both their names? I slept in the guest room that night with the door locked, listening to the air conditioner click and the house creak as if it, too, were reconsidering its loyalties. In the morning, I called in sick and drove to a low building with a blue awning that said legal aid. The waiting room had chairs that felt like classrooms. A woman with gray hair and sharp eyes listened while I spilled everything. She didn't flinch. First, she said, freeze your credit. She handed me a printed sheet with numbers and websites. Second, file a police report. She paused, measuring me. Third, find a private attorney who can move fast. Is it too late? I asked. Maybe, she said. Maybe not. Paper moves fast, but sometimes it leaves footprints. I did as she said. Freezing my credit felt like slamming a window shut in a storm. The police report felt like confessing to a crime I hadn't committed. The officer's pen squeaked. He asked if I felt safe at home. I think so, I said and heard the wobble. He gave me a case number I wrote twice in my phone as if doubling it would make it more real. The private attorney sat in a glass box office with a view of the river and framed diplomas that glowed. Her name was Laura Decker, the same one on the card in Evan's file box. I almost walked out, but the receptionist said there were two Deckers, father and daughter, and this one didn't do business law. Laura listened without interrupting, the kind of listening that hurts because it makes your own words sharper. She tapped a pen against a legal pad and said, "We're going to need the notary log, the deed chain, and the LLC's registered agent info. We'll also need to look at the HELOC paperwork and any POA." When I mentioned the coffee shop, she nodded. If the notary says she checked ID, we have to assume she saw your ID. She stapled her fingers. Have you ever given your ID to your husband to copy? Of course I had. Doctor's forms, apartment applications, gym memberships. Marriage is a long series of small trusts. Laura sent a letter that afternoon to the notary service, another to the bank, and a third to the registered agent for Hillside Meridian in Delaware, a company address that was also an address for 300 other companies. Shell, she said, but shells have owners. When I drove home, the sky was bruised purple, the kind that makes streetlights hum. Evan's car wasn't in the driveway. Inside the house, the air felt wrong, like someone had exhaled lies into the vents. I went to our bedroom and opened the closet. Half his clothes were gone. The space where his shoes usually sat looked like a mouth missing teeth. The charger on his nightstand was gone. The drawer with the bourbon was empty. I sat on the edge of the bed and heard a neighbor's laughter through the wall and thought absurdly about how sound travels. He texted at 9:03 p.m. At Gabe's for a few days. We need space. Don't make this harder than it is. I'll fix it. I stared at the words until they blurred. The next text arrived minutes later from a number I didn't recognize. This is a courtesy notice. Our company has taken assignment of your property from Hillside Meridian LLC. Please direct correspondence to Meridian Consulting Group. There was a PDF attached with a logo that looked expensive. The signature block said Gabe's full name, Managing Partner. A different text then from a friend of a friend who had seen Evan's Instagram story. Is everything okay? That video looked intense. I swallowed. I didn't follow Evan on Instagram anymore. We'd learned it made fights longer. I downloaded the app anyway and saw a clip of him on a rooftop with city lights like sequence behind him, holding a glass up to the camera. To big moves, he said, grinned Wolf Bright, to changing the game. The house popped as it cooled. I walked to the kitchen and opened the drawer where I kept the lemon cleaner. The smell steadied me. I wiped the counter until it shone. The deed chain, the notary, the shell company, the line of credit. They were lines I could follow, even if they led somewhere dark. Laura had said footprints. I would find them. How many steps does it take to walk back to the truth? Laura called the next morning. We can file an injunction to stall any transfer of possession, she said. But it will put you in open conflict with your husband and his partner. It could get public. Or we can try to negotiate quietly, leverage the bank's exposure, and unwind it with less blood. I stood by the kitchen window, looking at the oak's leaves tremble like fingers. If I go quiet, I asked, do I risk losing the house for good? Laura didn't sugarcoat. Maybe. Quiet buys time, but not guarantees. I had spent my whole marriage choosing quiet. It had seemed like love. Sometimes it was. But now quiet sounded like a trap lined with velvet. We file, I said, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. If there's a fire, I want to see it. Okay, Laura said. Then we need evidence. Anything that shows coercion or misrepresentation. Emails, texts, bank logs. And Claire, do not meet them alone. I wrote her words on a sticky note. Do not meet them alone. Then I put the note in my wallet next to my driver's license. The same ID a stranger had once copied while I ladled risotto into bowls. If bravery is a habit, maybe I could start small and repeat. The notary's log arrived by courier and a manila envelope with a pink Rush sticker. The handwriting was neat and bubbly. The entry for our notarization listed a Starbucks on South Lamar, 10:52 to 11:09 p.m., driver's license numbers that included mine, and a note. Client's wife very tired, signed quickly, husband reassured. There was a second entry 2 days later for a mortgage HELOC packet signed by wife via POA, husband present. The notary had drawn a box around POA present. My heart thudded in my ears. The limited power of attorney I'd found had been notarized the same night as the deed. Its language was narrower than the bank's use of it, but it existed. Laura read everything twice, lips moving. This helps and hurts, she said. The POA was for property transfer and mortgage facilitation. They stretched it to the HELOC. That's leverage. But a judge could say you consented to transfer in the first place. We'll argue duress and misrepresentation. She looked at me. Is there anything else? I shook my head, then remembered the risotto, the bourbon, the way he said I did this for us. Emotion isn't evidence, but intent can be. I drove to the Starbucks and asked if they kept camera footage from 6 weeks ago. The manager, a teenager with a manager's lanyard and an adult's exhaustion, said no. We're not that fancy, he said. Corporate might have something, but probably not. He looked at my face and added, I'm sorry. I sat in my car and watched people walk in and out with cups that said their names. I wanted a world that small again. Foam, warmth, a misspelled name that felt like charm instead of erasure. Back home, I opened a file I had been avoiding, the Evan app on his laptop, which he had not thought to log out of. Men like Evan are careful where they want to be and careless where it doesn't occur to others might look. I typed the date of the notarization. Images bloomed. The risotto in a pot, my hand stirring. He had taken a photo of my hand, tender as a thief. A selfie of him at 10:35 p.m. in our kitchen. The counters behind him, no coffee shop in sight. Then a screen recording of a bank login, his cursor moving like a nervous animal. After that, a photo of 2 bourbon glasses clinking, the timestamp 11:18 p.m. If he had been at a Starbucks at 11:09 p.m., he had flown home on a wing. Then, tucked between a photo of his new golf glove and a meme about hustle, a screenshot of a text from Gabe. Use the mobile notary's template. Fill in your kitchen address so it looks tidy. She's fine. She logs the location we tell her. Evan replied with a thumbs up emoji. I sent the images to Laura. Her response came fast. This is the second twist. We can argue falsified venue and bad faith notarization practices. It undermines credibility of the whole transaction. That night, Evan texted, "Let's talk. At Meridian office, tomorrow 6 p.m., neutral ground." I could feel the sticky note in my wallet heat up. Do not meet them alone. "You're not going," Laura said when I told her. "If you must communicate, I'll be there." "He'll be angry," I said, and heard the old fear in my voice like a melody I hated but knew by heart. "He already is," she said. "Anger isn't the worst thing. Silence is." At 6 p.m., we sat in a glass conference room that smelled like new carpet. Gabe wore a suit that said he wanted to be photographed. Evan looked thinner, his belt cutting a new notch. He looked at me like a man at a museum looking at something he used to own. Laura did most of the talking. She slid copies of the Starbucks photo, the timestamp, the notary log. Gabe's smile thinned. Evan's foot tapped under the table, a Morse code I no longer translated. Gabe tried charm first. "Claire," he said, palm up, "we obviously didn't intend any harm. This is structure, sophisticated structure." Then he tried threat with a sugar dusting. "If you push this, you push it into public record. It won't be fun." Laura smiled the way a surgeon might smile before making the first incision. "We're already there," she said. "Here's what happens next. My client files for a temporary restraining order against transfer, conversion, or encumbrance of the property. We notify the bank of the POA overreach. We request the notary's full logs and training materials. We depose your registered agent, or you return title and unwind the HELOC draws related to the house within 10 business days. You can keep your structure elsewhere." Evan leaned back, jaw tight. "Where do you think the money went, Claire?" he asked. His voice was a low wire. "You think I bought toys? I paid payroll. I kept us afloat." The pronouns made me dizzy. He had meant I kept me afloat. Laura didn't flinch. "Where the money went will be the bank's problem if they want to ask why they allowed a HELOC using a POA outside its scope. But you won't like those questions either." Gabe looked at Evan. "We'll be in touch," he said, which is the business way to say nothing. When we walked out into the dusk, the air was softer than it had been in weeks. Laura put a hand on my shoulder. "He's not the man you married," she said gently. I nodded, then shook my head because both things were true. Maybe he had always been this man, and I had married the future I thought I saw. What do you call it when the person you love becomes a stranger while keeping your keys? They filed nothing. We filed everything. The injunction hearing was set for a Tuesday, 2 months to the day after the risotto. The courthouse smelled like old paper and coffee that had burned an hour ago. In the hallway, I could hear lawyers speaking in low tones, the click of heels like rain. Evan stood at the end of the corridor with Gabe. He looked right through me, then down. I realized then that shame is an anchor. It drags the eyes. In the courtroom, the judge wore reading glasses on a chain and a face that said she had no time for drama without receipts. Laura presented our stack. The deed, the POA, the bank statements, the notary log, the Starbucks timestamp, the kitchen selfie. She didn't raise her voice. she let the paper talk. When it was Gabe's lawyer's turn, of course he had a lawyer. Sleek, tan, with cufflinks. He argued that sophisticated parties sometimes move assets for legitimate reasons, and that my consent was documented. He tried to paint me as forgetful, emotional, a wife regretting a business decision. Laura asked him politely to define business decision and then asked him to read the line in the POA that limited the scope. He read, slow. The judge tilted her head. The notary testified by video. Her background was a white wall with a plant that needed water. She said she always checked IDs. Laura asked how she recorded location. The notary said the client told her. She wrote it down. Laura asked if she had ever notarized at a Starbucks and listed a kitchen as venue. The notary hesitated. Sometimes, she said, for privacy. The judge leaned forward. For whose privacy? The notary glanced off screen. The client's? Or the client's husband's? Laura asked. The notary's mouth pressed into a line. Then it was me. My voice sounded like someone else's at first, thinner, higher. I told the judge about the risotto and the bourbon and the lemon cleaner and the way Evan tapped the pen. I told her about the envelopes and the drawer and the way the word possession rang in my ears. I said my father taught me to read everything twice and tried not to cry. I didn't cry. I watched the judge's pen moving, notes, not doodles. Evan didn't take the stand. His lawyer said he wasn't necessary at this stage. But when the judge asked directly, Mr. Hale, did you instruct the notary to list a different venue than the actual location? Evan cleared his throat and said, I don't recall. The judge's lips twitched in a way that wasn't a smile. She ruled from the bench, which, I learned, meant she didn't need time to think. Temporary restraining order granted. No transfer, sale, encumbrance, or occupancy change pending further hearing. The court finds a likelihood of success on the merits with respect to claims of misrepresentation and unauthorized use of power of attorney. Counsel will meet and confer about expedited discovery. Her gavel was small. The sound was not. In the hallway, Evan walked past me without meeting my eyes. I caught a whiff of his aftershave and remembered our wedding, how my veil had kept blowing into my mouth and he had held it back with 2 fingers. Memory is cruel that way. It serves sweetness even as you choke. Laura squeezed my arm. We bought time. Now we use it. If victory is a door, it still has locks you have to learn. Buying time let sunlight in. Discovery brought emails that read worse under oath. The bank, facing the possibility of being named, offered to unwind the HELOC in exchange for a release as to me. Meridian withdrew its claim to the property with language that sounded like benevolence, but smelled like fear. Title crawled back, scratched and thin, but ours again. Laura pushed for fees. The judge nodded toward a future hearing. Evan moved out for good. He texted less and then not at all, except once. You ruined me. I wrote and deleted 20 replies. The one I kept said, I told the truth. A month later, I learned through a friend that Cobalt River folded. Gabe posted a photo on a beach with a caption about lessons. Evan's Instagram went dark. I sold the fire pit on a neighborhood app because the patio felt like a lie. I kept the plant that kept almost dying because it felt honest. My father came down on a Saturday and fixed a dripping faucet and didn't say, I told you, even once. He did say, proud of you, kid, which felt like a clean bandage. When the divorce papers came, straightforward, almost boring, I read every line until the words stopped being words and became shapes. I changed my name back only on the accounts that were easiest and left it on the ones that required time because time is money, and I was repairing both. The house didn't feel like home for a while. Then slowly it did, especially in the mornings when the sun came across the floor in a stripe and I could hear the oak tapping the window like a polite friend. If healing is a ledger, maybe I was finally in the black. People ask me, when I let them close enough to ask, how someone like me could sign without reading. I want to tell them there is no like me. There is only being tired and wanting to believe the person you love is handing you more than paper. There is only the way butter and onions smell when someone cooks for you, the way a pen feels familiar in your hand, the hum of a house at bedtime. We think danger wears a mask or breaks a window. Sometimes it wears cologne and taps a page with a friendly pen. I am not the woman who signed anymore. I am also not entirely different. I still keep lists and label the shelves in the pantry. I still like the quiet that comes after a joke when both people smile to themselves. But now I read everything twice. I say the hard sentence first. I keep copies of my ID in a locked drawer. I know that ink can do violence and that paper can be a weapon and a shield. Mostly, I know my name, what it's worth, and what it signs me up for. If trust is a gift, I've learned to wrap it smaller and give it slower. I sign my name slowly now, letter by letter, like a promise I make to myself out loud. And when someone hands me a pen at night, I turn on every light in the house.